Experiences and points of view are ingrained into a piece of cinema through the filmmaker. When you turn the camera towards your own image, what point of view do you find most readily coming through? That of the filmmaker artist or that of your inward and personal soul, and why?
Both, I guess. I don't think it's impossible to separate artistic inquiry or output from the set of experiences one has been informed by. It's sort of like thinking you could make art in a vacuum. We're all informed by all the things we've done our entire lives, from experiences we've had in friendships and relationships, in community, in education, in the world, adversities. All of those things are playing into artwork all the time, even if the work is, presumably completely formal or conceptually minimalist or whatever. It's I think it's pretty kind of universal across the board. It's impossible to separate, but the film really is, meant to kind of like hit you in the core, so like I think, the word soul that you use is a good word to kind of draw attention to that impetus. I often think about some of my projects like more closely in relationship to music than the art world, because that sense of soul, that tangibility of emotion is really important to me. And so while I'm juggling all these kind of like formal principles at the same time, I'm also really wanting to invest in the emotive experience and kind of foster the sense of empathy that comes with being able to access someone else's emotional landscape.
Now, religion is codified within your family's DNA. In instances where religion, quote, saves somebody, unquote, there can be a finality to that person's piety that becomes a way to judge others, and we as a society are trained to accept that. If we take God out of the conversation, do you think religion does more damage to a person's soul than less? And again, why?
I think it really depends on that person. And I think we experience this over and over again with the ways different people access their ideologies. And, I know plenty of well-intentioned liberal Americans that will scoff at someone for a set of beliefs without even seeking to inquire what exactly that belief system entails. And so I think anyone is just as capable as anyone else of letting their set of ideologies or belief systems, I don't know, divide them or like prevent them access to stories or beliefs or situations or people that could enrich in their lives. I know that, on one hand, religion is responsible for basically every single war in history. Like all of these mass genocides are woven within spiritual belief system. And like, that's a really painful truth that many people that practice religion are not willing to accept. But at the same time, thinking big picture, I can be like, yes, religion is the root of all evil. And thinking small picture, I can think, well, I know, for addicts in particular, like finding a spirituality is the crux of their existence and gives them a reason to live. So like, it's a really hard line to differentiate when we're talking about like micro versus macro. And,
Right.
I think like human beings do need systems of belief to help them find meaning in their everyday actions, and also to make meaning out of human suffering, right? Like every religion at the end of the day has some sense of, and you must endure suffering and to move through this life. And I think people need that. They need some system of belief, whether it's, like staunch environmentalism or some form of understanding that makes life worth living.
Right.
And that's different for everybody. And that's also why so many marginalized communities create communities and woven fabric the way they do, is that's a stand-in and sometimes for what would have been a more conventional approach to religious community.
Since you made a gender transition, the question of identity must have come up over and over to yourself and at a very young age. When struggling with these identities, what survival instincts emerged? And what advice would you give anyone about struggling to survive in the face of confronting identity?
Yeah, I think this one goes across the boards, but that is to, find people that support you, and not just people that are like you, but people that support you. So like people that have your best intentions in mind. Like sometimes when we gravitate towards other people who are struggling with similar situations as us, um, we're bringing, all of our pain and suffering together, and potentially mental health and mental illness. And those are not always the most helpful relationships, even though we really gravitate towards them, if you're a whole bunch of like suicidal queer kids hanging out together, like there's the system of support there in your queerness and your struggle for that, but there's also like, you might not be making the best decisions for yourself. You might be misusing substances. You might be falling into, areas of work that are not healthy for you or whatever. So I think it's important to find your people. And by your people, I don't just mean, your people that are just like you, but the people that have your best interests in minds, want to support your health and your wellness as a whole person. And I think, I think that's a lot easier to do now than it was when I was younger. I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and, the conversations are really different. The access points are really different. It's a different landscape.
In the film, you talk about apologies and proclamations of love as words that can heal, but also can be bereft of meaning if that is the only thing offered. What was it about your mother's confession in the film that allowed you to cross into a deeper meaning of her apology?
I think I had already forgiven her before I asked the question. I think the process we had been through together over the last 5 years is what led me to that forgiveness, to be part of my process and to sort of bear witness to her. Yeah, it's a really hard question to answer. I think, I was surprised at her response that she didn't remember it, but at the same time, I was not surprised at all. Because, we do things every day that, and I feel like I maybe am a little more privy to this because I'm a teacher now too, but like, the smallest thing you could say can really destroy a person when they're in development. And it might be something you think nothing of, to such an extreme that she didn't remember saying it, which her response in some ways was also a challenge, because then I had to reconcile the fact that like I had been carrying this thing with me for, over a decade that she never remembered saying. And so I also began a new set of, just internal questions within that fraction of a second of time to respond, which is like, why didn't I ask this a long time ago? When she maybe would have remembered, or when she maybe would have been able to tell me right away, like I was having my own lapse in reality, whatever.
This is Patrick McDonald for HollywoodChicago.com. Copyright 2021.